The turkey was perfectly golden. The cranberry sauce glistened in the afternoon light streaming through our dining room window, and my stomach churned with more than hunger. I sat across from my parents, Frank and Carol, while my younger brother Jake carved another slice of white meat. The conversation had been light until I asked the question that had been eating at me for weeks. "Did the hospital send my surgery appointment yet?" I asked, setting down my water glass. My parents exchanged a glance before my father cleared his throat. "They did send it last week, Tommy." My mother nodded, dabbing her lips with her napkin. "But we used your surgery money for Jake's birthday party. He only has one birthday a year." I put down my fork, the metallic clink echoing in the sudden silence. "So I guess you still don't know who really needs the surgery." Their faces went pale immediately. "So who is it?" The silence stretched across our dining room table like a fault line ready to split everything apart. Jake stopped chewing, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth, while my parents stared at me with expressions I had never seen before. Pure confusion mixed with dawning fear. "What are you talking about, Tommy?" my mother whispered, her voice barely audible above the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. I leaned back in my chair, studying my brother's face as realization crept across his features. The slight wince when he shifted his weight, the way he had been favoring his right side all evening, the prescription bottle I had glimpsed him shoving into his jacket pocket when I arrived. "Jake's been hiding it from you for months," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing in my chest. "Haven't you, little brother?" Jake's complexion turned ashen, matching the color of our grandmother's china plates. He set his fork down with trembling fingers. "I don't know what you're talking about," he mumbled, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted toward the stairs, toward his bedroom where I knew he kept his medical records hidden beneath his mattress. 3 months ago," I continued, watching my parents' faces carefully. "Remember when Jake fell off the Hendersons' roof? You thought he was just drunk again, stumbling around their backyard after that party. But he didn't just bruise his ego that night." My father's brow furrowed. He said he was fine, a little sore, but nothing serious. "Tommy, stop," Jake pleaded, genuine panic creeping into his voice. But I couldn't stop. Not after spending the last 11 months working 60-hour weeks at Peterson's Auto Repair, my hands cracked and bleeding from engine oil and metal, saving every penny for my herniated disc surgery. Not after watching my parents spend $12,000 on a birthday party that lasted 4 hours. "Show them your prescription bottles, Jake," I said quietly. "The ones you hide in your old baseball mitt. The oxycodone, the muscle relaxers, the anti-inflammatories." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "Jake, is this true?" Jake's breathing became shallow, and I watched him struggle to maintain his composure. The brother who had always been their golden child, their pride and joy, their investment in the future, the one who could do no wrong while I scraped and saved and sacrificed. "How did you know?" he whispered. "Because I've been watching you suffer for weeks," I replied, feeling my anger build like pressure in a boiler. "I've watched you take pills before breakfast. I've seen you grip the stair railing like your life depends on it. I've noticed how you can barely lift a gallon of milk without your face contorting in agony." I turned to my parents, who sat frozen in their chairs. "And I've been watching both of you ignore it because acknowledging it would mean admitting your precious son isn't perfect." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't know, Tommy. We had no idea he was in pain." "You didn't want to know," I corrected her, "just like you didn't want to know that I've been working double shifts since last Christmas, skipping meals, driving a car with 200,000 miles on it because I couldn't afford the repairs. All so I could fix a back injury that happened at the construction site you told me to quit because college was more important." Jake tried to stand, but his legs buckled slightly, and he grabbed the edge of the table for support. The movement sent a spasm through his back so severe that he cried out involuntarily. "Jesus," my father breathed, finally seeing what had been in front of him for months. "It started as a dull ache," Jake admitted, his voice breaking. "After the fall, I thought it would go away, but it got worse every week. I can barely sleep. I can't concentrate. I've been buying pain pills from Danny Morrison because I was too scared to tell you guys." My heart broke a little, despite my anger. Jake was 25 years old, but in that moment, he looked like the scared little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "Why didn't you say anything?" my mother asked, reaching toward him but stopping short. "Because you've spent the last 5 years telling everyone how proud you are of me," Jake said, tears streaming down his cheeks. How I'm going to make something of myself. How I'm different from other kids my age. How could I tell you that I'm just as broken as everyone else? I felt the familiar surge of resentment that had been my constant companion since childhood. Even in his moment of confession, Jake was still the victim, still the one deserving of sympathy and understanding. Do you want to know the difference between us, Jake? I asked, standing from my chair. When I got hurt, I went to work anyway. I saved my money. I scheduled my surgery. I took responsibility for fixing my problems. You got hurt and decided to party your pain away and let everyone else deal with the consequences. That's not fair, Tommy, my mother protested. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. What's fair is that the person who actually needs surgery gets it, and Jake's MRI shows 3 herniated discs and spinal compression that could leave him paralyzed if it gets worse. The room fell silent except for the sound of Jake's labored breathing. How do you know about his MRI? My father asked. Because I drove him to get it last week when he collapsed at his apartment, I replied. I've been the one taking care of this while you planned his birthday party. Jake's face crumpled completely. I'm sorry, Tommy. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell them. I didn't know how to ask for help. But before I could respond, Jake's knees gave out entirely, and he crashed to the floor, his back seizing in a spasm so violent that his scream echoed off our dining room walls. The sound of Jake hitting the hardwood floor snapped something inside me, but not in the way I expected. Instead of rushing to help him, I found myself thinking with crystal clarity for the first time in months. As my parents scrambled to Jake's side, their voices high and panicked, I walked calmly to my father's home office. Tommy, where are you going? My mother called. We need to call 911. Jake will be fine in a few minutes, I called back, opening the filing cabinet where my father kept his financial records. His pain comes in waves. This isn't the first time I've seen him like this. I had been thinking about this moment for weeks, ever since discovering that my parents had access to my bank account from when I lived at home during community college. The account I had never closed because it was easier to deposit my paychecks there. The account that should have had $15,000 in it by now, not the $3,000 I saw in my last statement. My hands shook slightly as I pulled out bank statements and credit reports. My parents were so focused on Jake, writhing on the dining room floor, that they didn't notice me spreading documents across my father's mahogany desk. The first irregularity jumped out immediately. July 15th. Withdrawal of $2,800. The same day, Jake had posted photos of his new car's down payment on social media. September 3rd. Another withdrawal of $1,500. Jake's college textbooks that he claimed he needed for his final semester. But the deeper I dug, the sicker I became. March of last year. $3,000, the exact amount Jake had spent on his spring break trip to Cancun. October, $4,000, matching Jake's motorcycle payment that he had bragged about to our neighbors. Tommy, what are you doing in there? My father's voice carried from the dining room. Finding out how much you've stolen from me, I called back, pulling out my credit report. The report showed loans I had never applied for. A credit card in my name with a balance of $8,000. A personal loan for $12,000 that I had supposedly taken out in May, all of them carrying my forged signature. I photographed everything with my phone, my anger transforming into cold determination. Years of wondering why my savings grew so slowly despite working overtime constantly. Years of feeling guilty for not contributing more to the family while Jake lived like a trust fund baby on an auto mechanic's salary. When I returned to the dining room, Jake was sitting in his chair again, his breathing slowly returning to normal. My parents looked up at me with hopeful expressions, as if I might have been fetching pain medication. Instead, I placed the bank statements on the table next to the turkey platter. Interesting reading, I said, sitting back down. Dad, want to explain this withdrawal pattern? Or should I start with the credit accounts you opened in my name? My father's face drained of color. Tommy, I can explain. Please do, I said, spreading the documents out so everyone could see them. Start with the car loan. Did you really think I wouldn't figure out that you co-signed for Jake's Honda using my credit history? My mother's hands trembled as she picked up one of the bank statements. We were going to pay it back, she whispered. When? I asked. Before or after you used my surgery fund for Jake's birthday party? Jake stared at the papers with growing horror. Mom, Dad, what is this? What did you do? We were helping you build your future, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. Your brother has a stable job. He could afford to help out family. By stealing from me? I asked. By forging my signature on loan documents? By spending money I earned with my own hands while telling me I needed to be more responsible with my finances? I pulled out my phone and started reading from my notes. June 5th, 2022. You withdrew $800 the same day Jake needed money for his gym membership. September 12th, $1,200 for Jake's computer. December 20th, $2,000 for Jake's holiday spending spree. With each date, Jake's expression grew more stricken. I didn't know, he said quietly. I thought you guys were helping me with your own money. Of course you didn't ask questions, I replied. Why would you? It's easier to take than to earn. My mother stood abruptly, pacing toward the window. We thought you understood that family helps each other. Jake needed support to get established. You were already working, already stable. Stable? I laughed bitterly. Do you know why I've been eating ramen noodles for dinner 4 nights a week? Why I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years? Why I drive a car that breaks down every other month? Because you've been systematically draining my accounts to fund Jake's lifestyle. The front door opened, and Sarah's voice called out from the foyer. Hello? Tommy, your mom said I should come straight in. My girlfriend appeared in the dining room doorway, her nurse scrubs still on from her shift at Mercy General. She took in the scene, documents scattered across the table, Jake pale and shaken in his chair, my parents looking guilty and trapped. What's going on? She asked, moving to stand beside my chair. My parents have been stealing from my surgery fund, I said simply. For years, apparently. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. She knelt beside Jake, checking his pulse and examining his posture. You're in significant pain, she observed. How long has this been going on? 3 months, Jake admitted. Maybe longer. Sarah looked up at my parents. And you didn't notice your son was suffering from what appears to be severe spinal injury? We thought he was just adjusting to adult life, my mother said weakly. Sarah stood, her expression professional but cold. Tommy's been telling me about his financial struggles for months. He's been skipping meals to save money for surgery. I offered to help, but he insisted on paying his own way. She picked up one of the bank statements. Now I understand why he's been struggling. My father attempted damage control. Sarah, you don't understand our family dynamics. Tommy's always been the responsible one. We knew he could handle it. Handle having his money stolen? Sarah asked sharply. Handle working himself into exhaustion while you funded Jake's partying? It wasn't partying, my mother protested. We were investing in Jake's future, his potential. What potential? I asked, standing up. Jake dropped out of college 3 times. He's never held a job for longer than 6 months. He spends every weekend at bars or house parties. What exactly were you investing in? Jake's face crumpled. I never graduated, he whispered. The admission hit the room like a physical blow. What? My father asked. I never finished college. I dropped out 2 years ago. I've been lying to you guys, telling you I was taking classes when I was really just, I don't know, trying to figure out my life. The money you gave me for tuition, I used it for other things. My mother sank back into her chair. 2 years? You've been lying to us for 2 years? I couldn't disappoint you again, Jake said, tears flowing freely now. You were so proud when I enrolled. You told everyone I was going to be the first college graduate in our family. I couldn't take that away from you. Sarah pulled out her phone. I'm going to show you something, she said, opening her banking app. This is my savings account, $15,000. I've been setting it aside to help Tommy with medical expenses because I was worried about how thin he's been stretching himself financially. She looked directly at my parents. I make $38,000 a year as a registered nurse. I've managed to save this much in 18 months by budgeting carefully and living within my means. Tommy makes $45,000 as a mechanic. How is it possible that he has less saved than I do, unless someone has been taking his money? The question hung in the air like smoke. My father cleared his throat. We were going to tell you, eventually, about the loans. We figured you'd understand once Jake got established and could pay you back. With what job? I asked. What income? What skills? You've enabled him to be completely dependent on you while making me pay for the privilege of being responsible. I gathered up all the documents and headed toward the door. I'm going home to figure out exactly how much you've stolen from me, and then I'm deciding whether to involve the police or just cut you out of my life entirely. Tommy, wait, my mother called. We can work this out. We're family. I turned back to look at them. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't forge signatures. And family doesn't lie about it for years while watching one child struggle to pay for medical care they desperately need. As I reached for my jacket, Jake spoke up one more time. There's something else you should know, he said quietly. The loan documents. I signed some of them too. Dad told me you had agreed to help me out, and I just needed to co-sign as a formality. My hand froze on the doorknob. What loan documents? Jake pulled out his phone and scrolled through his text messages. The home equity loan. Against the house. $15,000. Dad said you wanted to help with home improvements, and it was easier to use the house as collateral. Sarah and I exchanged glances. Tommy, she said carefully, what home improvements? I looked around our dining room, noting the same faded wallpaper, the same worn carpet, the same fixtures that had been there since my childhood. There weren't any home improvements, I said slowly. And that's when I realized the depth of my parents' deception went far beyond anything I had imagined. The revelation about the home equity loan hit me like a physical punch to the chest. I stared at Jake, trying to process what he had just admitted, when suddenly his face contorted in agony and he pitched forward in his chair. Jake, my mother screamed. This wasn't like the previous episode. Jake's back arched unnaturally, his hands clawing at the table as waves of spasms tore through his spine. His breathing came in short, desperate gasps, and when he tried to speak, only strangled sounds emerged. Sarah immediately dropped to her knees beside him, her medical training taking over completely. Call 911 right now, she commanded, her hands gently supporting Jake's head and neck. This is not a normal muscle spasm. I fumbled for my phone while my parents stood frozen in terror. 911, what's your emergency? I need an ambulance at 15 Oak Street, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. 25-year-old male with severe back injury, experiencing what appears to be spinal crisis. Sarah was speaking in low, reassuring tones to Jake. Try to stay as still as possible. Don't fight the pain, just breathe through it. Help is coming. But Jake's condition was deteriorating rapidly. His legs began to twitch uncontrollably, and when Sarah asked him to wiggle his toes, nothing happened. I can't feel my feet, Jake whispered, panic creeping into his voice. Sarah, I can't feel anything below my knees. The ambulance arrived within 8 minutes, but those 8 minutes felt like hours. The paramedics worked efficiently, stabilizing Jake's neck and spine before carefully transferring him to a stretcher. Sarah rode with him while I followed my parents to Mercy General Hospital. The emergency room was a blur of activity. Jake disappeared behind curtains while we sat in the waiting area, sterile fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My mother alternated between crying and praying, while my father stared blankly at the worn carpet tiles. Dr. Martinez, the attending physician, emerged after what felt like an eternity. Are you Jake's family? He asked. Yes, my father said, standing quickly. How is he? Dr. Martinez consulted his chart. Your son has severe compression of his lumbar spine with potential nerve damage. We need to operate within the next 12 to 18 hours to prevent permanent paralysis. My mother's legs gave out, and she collapsed back into the plastic chair. What kind of operation? I asked. Spinal decompression and fusion. We'll need to remove damaged disc material and stabilize the vertebrae. It's a complex procedure, but necessary to restore function to his lower extremities. My father nodded. Whatever he needs. When can you schedule it? Dr. Martinez looked uncomfortable. I need to speak with you about insurance coverage. Your son's policy appears to have lapsed. Lapsed? My mother asked. What do you mean? A financial coordinator appeared beside Dr. Martinez, carrying a tablet and wearing a sympathetic but professional expression. I'm Jennifer Walsh from Patient Financial Services, she said, sitting across from us. Jake's insurance was canceled approximately 2 months ago due to non-payment of premiums. My father's face went white. That's impossible. We set up automatic payments. The account the payments were drawing from was closed in August, Jennifer explained gently. The insurance company sent several notices before canceling the policy. I felt that familiar cold realization settling in my stomach. What account was closed in August? Jennifer consulted her tablet. The joint checking account ending in 4792. I knew that account number. It was the emergency fund my parents had maintained for family medical expenses. The account they had told me was specifically for situations like this. Where did that money go? I asked my father directly. He couldn't meet my eyes. Jake's birthday party was more expensive than we anticipated. The venue, the catering, the band. You spent the insurance premium money on a party? Sarah asked, having rejoined us after giving her statement about Jake's condition. We thought we could replace it before the next payment was due, my mother said weakly. Jennifer cleared her throat. The surgery will cost approximately $50,000 if performed as an emergency procedure. If we can delay until a charity bed opens up, the cost would be significantly reduced, but the wait could be several weeks. Dr. Martinez shook his head. I don't recommend waiting. The compression is severe enough that every day increases the risk of permanent damage. I stared at my parents, watching them grapple with the consequences of their financial irresponsibility. Jake could be paralyzed for life because they couldn't resist throwing an extravagant birthday party. What are our options? My father asked. Jennifer pulled out several forms. You can apply for emergency financial assistance, which takes 3 to 5 business days to process. You can arrange payment plans, though they require substantial down payments. Or you can provide payment in full before the surgery. How much down payment? My mother asked. $25,000. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents looked at each other, then at me, then at Sarah, as if one of us might magically produce that amount of money. Tommy, my father said quietly, you have good credit. Maybe you could take out a loan. I stood up abruptly. Are you serious? After everything you've done, you want me to go into debt to fix this? He's your brother, my mother pleaded. And you're his parents, I replied. You're the ones who stole money that could have paid for this surgery. You're the ones who spent his insurance premium money on a party. You're the ones who created this situation. Sarah placed her hand on my arm. Tommy, she said softly, I have the money. My savings could cover the down payment. I turned to stare at her. Absolutely not. This isn't your responsibility. But it's not really about responsibility anymore, she said. It's about Jake's life. He could be paralyzed. I felt tears stinging my eyes. Sarah was willing to sacrifice her entire savings for my brother, the same brother who had never shown her anything but polite indifference, the same brother who had unknowingly benefited from years of stolen money. I need some air, I said, walking toward the exit. Outside, the November evening was crisp and clear. I sat on a concrete bench and tried to think clearly. Jake was lying in a hospital bed, possibly facing permanent disability. My parents had created this crisis through years of selfishness and poor decisions. Sarah was prepared to sacrifice everything to help someone who wasn't even her family, and I was the one who had to decide whether to enable my parents' behavior one more time or let my brother suffer the consequences of their choices. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jake. Somehow, he had managed to convince a nurse to let him send it. Tommy, don't blame yourself for this. I know what they did to you. I recorded everything on my phone before the ambulance came. They can't lie anymore. Don't sacrifice yourself or Sarah for their mistakes. I love you, brother. I stared at the message, realizing that Jake had been more aware of our family dynamics than I had given him credit for. And more importantly, he had evidence of our parents' admissions. I stood up and walked back into the hospital, but instead of going to the waiting room, I went to the information desk. I need to speak with Patient Financial Services, I said, and I need to make some phone calls. It was time to force my parents to face the full truth about their financial situation. I spent 45 minutes in the hospital's family consultation room, using their phone and Wi-Fi to conduct the most important research of my life. While my parents sat in the waiting room, believing I was arranging financing for Jake's surgery, I was actually uncovering the extent of their deception. The first call I made was to my bank's fraud department. After explaining the situation and providing documentation numbers from the papers I had photographed, the representative walked me through every unauthorized transaction from the past 3 years. Mr. Tommy, based on what I'm seeing here, you have grounds for serious fraud charges, the bank representative said. These signatures don't match your authenticated signature card, and several of these loans show evidence of identity theft. What about the home equity loan Jake mentioned? I asked. Let me check that account. There was a pause while she typed. That loan was approved for $65,000, not $15,000. It was fully disbursed 6 months ago. My stomach dropped. $65,000? What happened to the other $50,000? I can't provide specifics over the phone, but I can tell you the funds were transferred to multiple accounts, some of which appear to be investment portfolios. Investment portfolios. My parents had taken out a massive loan against their house, told Jake it was for $15,000 in home improvements, and invested the rest while using my surgery money for his birthday party. My second call was to the county assessor's office. Public records showed that my parents owned not just our family home, but also a rental property on Maple Street that generated $1,200 per month in income, a property I had never known existed. The third call was to Edward Financial Services, the firm whose business card I had found in my father's desk drawer. Eddie Hartwell speaking, came the cheerful voice. Mr. Hartwell, this is Tommy Thompson. I believe you handle my parents' investment accounts. Frank and Carol Thompson? Tommy, of course, your parents speak about you all the time. Are you finally ready to start investing some of your hard-earned money? My blood chilled. My parents talk about me? Oh yes, they're very proud of how responsible you are. Frank was just saying last week how you've been working extra shifts to pay for medical expenses. Real character building, he said, not like these young people who expect everything handed to them. I gripped the phone tighter. Mr. Hartwell, can you tell me about my parents' current portfolio value? Well, I can't give exact numbers without authorization, but they're doing quite well. The mutual funds and index investments have performed excellently this year, plus that real estate income stream, and the recent deposit from their home equity loan. I'd estimate they're sitting pretty comfortable, probably close to $200,000 in total assets. $200,000. My parents had been crying poor while sitting on a fortune that could have covered both Jake's surgery and my surgery multiple times over. The recent deposit you mentioned, I said carefully. From the home equity loan? $50,000, invested in a balanced portfolio last spring. Smart move, really. At their age, they needed something generating better returns than a savings account. I thanked Mr. Hartwell and hung up, my hands shaking with rage. Sarah found me 20 minutes later, still sitting in the consultation room with pages of notes spread across the table. What's all this? She asked, sitting beside me. Evidence, I said simply. My parents aren't broke, Sarah. They're not even close to broke. I walked her through everything I had discovered. The hidden rental property, the investment accounts worth $200,000, the home equity loan they had lied about, the systematic theft from my accounts while they secretly accumulated wealth. They've been playing poor while building an investment portfolio, I said. They took out a $65,000 loan, told Jake it was for $15,000 in home improvements, invested the remaining $50,000, and used my surgery money for his birthday party because they didn't want to touch their own assets. Sarah stared at the documents. I can't even process this level of manipulation. It gets worse, I said, showing her my notes from the call with their financial advisor. According to Mr. Hartwell, they've been bragging about my work ethic and financial responsibility. They think it's character building for me to struggle while they live comfortably off my stolen money. Sarah's nursing background had taught her to remain calm in crisis situations, but I watched her professional composure crack. They've been watching you skip meals and drive a falling-apart car while sitting on $200,000? She asked, and laughing about it, apparently. The financial advisor said they think it's good for young people to learn the value of hard work. I gathered up all the documents and stood. Come on, it's time to confront them with the truth. We found my parents in the waiting room where we had left them, my mother clutching a tissue and my father staring at his phone. Tommy, thank goodness, my mother said. Were you able to arrange financing? I was able to arrange some things, I said, sitting across from them. Tell me about your rental property on Maple Street. My father's face went completely white. How did you find out about that? My mother whispered. The same way I found out about your $200,000 in investment accounts, I replied. And the $65,000 home equity loan you lied to Jake about. I placed the printed records on the coffee table between us. I spent an hour on the phone with your financial advisor, Eddie Hartwell. Interesting guy. very chatty once he thought I was a potential client. My parents sat in stunned silence as I continued. He told me how proud you are of my work ethic, how you think it builds character for young people to struggle financially, how you've been laughing about my financial difficulties while building an investment portfolio with stolen money. Tommy, you don't understand, my father started. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. You've been systematically stealing from me for years while accumulating enough wealth to pay for both surgeries without even touching your principal investments. You've been teaching me the value of hard work by making sure I never benefit from mine. My mother was crying openly now. We wanted to make sure you developed good work habits by stealing from me, by forging my signature on loan documents, by spending my surgery money on a party while Jake suffered in agony. Sarah leaned forward. You have enough money to pay for Jake's surgery right now, tonight, without affecting your long-term financial security at all. That money is for our retirement, my father said weakly. And Tommy's money was for his surgery, Sarah replied. Jake's insurance premiums were for his medical care. Where does your responsibility to your children factor into your retirement planning? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where ambulances continued to arrive with other families facing their own crises. Here's what's going to happen, I said without turning around. You're going to pay for Jake's surgery using your own money. All of it, including any follow-up care and rehabilitation he needs. Tommy, my mother started. I'm not finished, I said, turning back to face them. You're going to repay every penny you stole from me, with interest calculated at the same rate as the loans you took out in my name, and you're going to do it immediately, not in installments. My father's shoulders sagged. That would be most of our liquid assets. Good, I said. Maybe then you'll understand what it feels like to worry about money. I pulled out my phone and opened Jake's text message. Oh, and one more thing. Jake recorded your entire confession earlier. Every admission of theft, every explanation of your justifications, every detail about how you've been manipulating both of us. The color drained from both their faces. He what? My mother whispered. Smart kid, my brother. Smarter than you gave him credit for. Certainly smarter than you expected when you were stealing money and lying about it. I showed them Jake's message on my phone. He sent me this while we were outside. He knows everything, and he has proof of everything. My parents looked at each other with the expression of people who had just realized their entire world was crumbling around them. Now, I said, let's go pay for Jake's surgery so he can start recovering from the damage you've caused. The walk back to Jake's room felt like a funeral procession. My parents moved with the shuffling gait of people who had been completely defeated, while Sarah and I flanked them like guards escorting prisoners. The sterile hospital corridors echoed with the sound of our footsteps and the distant beeping of medical equipment. Jake was awake when we entered his room, propped up on pillows with his phone in his hand. The color had returned to his face, but his eyes held a mixture of pain and determination that I had never seen before. Did you tell them? He asked me directly. I told them about the money, I replied. All of it. Jake looked at our parents, who remained standing near the door as if afraid to come closer. I heard everything you said in the dining room, he told them. About the stolen money, about the forged signatures, about how you thought it was character building for Tommy to struggle. Jake, we can explain, our mother said, moving toward his bed. Stop, Jake said firmly. I don't want to hear explanations. I want to hear you admit what you did. Our father cleared his throat. Son, the money situation is complicated. It's not complicated at all, Jake interrupted, his voice stronger than I had heard it in months. You stole from Tommy. For years, you made him work himself into exhaustion while you built investment portfolios. You spent his surgery money on my birthday party and let me think you were sacrificing for me. Jake held up his phone. I've been recording everything since Tommy left for the office earlier, including the part where you admitted you could afford my surgery but don't want to touch your retirement funds. The silence in the room was broken only by the steady beeping of Jake's heart monitor. We worked hard for that money, our father said finally. Tommy worked hard for his money too, Jake replied. But that didn't stop you from taking it. I watched my parents' faces as the full weight of their situation became clear. They were trapped between their own greed and their son's medical emergency, with 2 witnesses and recorded evidence of their crimes. What do you want us to do? Our mother asked, tears streaming down her cheeks. I want you to pay for my surgery, Jake said. "Using your own money. And I want you to pay Tommy back everything you stole from him. That's most of our savings," our father protested. "Tommy's surgery money was most of his savings too," Sarah said coldly. "The difference is, he earned his money legally." Jake shifted in his bed, wincing with pain. "There's something else," he said. "I've been thinking about this situation, and I realize you didn't just steal money. You stole trust. You stole my relationship with my brother." He looked directly at our parents. "For years, I thought Tommy was selfish. I thought he had money and just didn't want to help family. I resented him for being successful while I struggled. I didn't know he was struggling too because you were taking his money to give to me. We were trying to help you both," our mother said weakly. "By pitting us against each other," Jake replied. "By making Tommy think I was spoiled and ungrateful, and making me think he didn't care about family." I felt a knot forming in my throat. Jake was right. Our parents' manipulation had damaged our relationship for years, making us see each other as the problem instead of recognizing the real source of our family's dysfunction. "I want to know something," Jake continued. "When you used Tommy's surgery money for my birthday party, did you even consider that he might be in pain too?" Our mother's face crumpled. "We thought his injury was less serious. He never complained." "Because he's not a complainer," Jake said. "Because he was raised to be responsible and self-reliant. Because you taught him that asking for help was weakness." Jake turned to me. "Tommy, show them the recording I sent you." I pulled out my phone and played Jake's message from earlier. His voice filled the room. "Tommy, don't blame yourself for this. I know what they did to you. I recorded everything on my phone before the ambulance came. They can't lie anymore." But there was more to the recording that I hadn't heard before. Jake's voice continued. "Mom, Dad, if you're listening to this later, I want you to know that I would rather be paralyzed than let Tommy sacrifice any more for your mistakes. He's done enough. He's given enough. If you love me at all, you'll pay for this surgery yourself and leave Tommy alone." The room fell silent, except for our mother's quiet sobbing. "Jake," our father started. "I'm not finished," Jake said. "I've made my own mistakes. I've been lazy and irresponsible, and I've taken advantage of Tommy's generosity without questioning where the money came from. But I'm done being your pawn in this game." He struggled to reach his bedside table and pulled out a manila envelope. "These are copies of all my medical records," he said, "including the MRI results that show I need surgery more urgently than Tommy does. I'm giving them to Tommy so he can make the decision about what happens next." Jake held out the envelope to me. "If you want to let me suffer the consequences of their choices, I'll understand. If you want to help me despite everything they've done, I'll be grateful. But whatever you decide, it's your choice, not theirs." I stared at the envelope, understanding the impossible position Jake was putting me in. He was giving me the power to decide his fate while making it clear that our parents would no longer have any say in the matter. "There's one more thing," Jake said, his voice growing tired from the effort of speaking. "I'm 25 years old, I'm an adult, and I'm done letting them make decisions for me." He looked directly at our parents. "After this is over, however it ends, I don't want to see you again until you've paid back every penny you stole from Tommy and apologized to him publicly for what you've done." "Jake, you can't mean that," our mother pleaded. "I mean every word," Jake replied. "Tommy's been more of a parent to me these past few months than either of you have been in years. He's the one who drove me to doctor appointments. He's the one who researched my condition. He's the one who cared enough to notice I was suffering." Jake's voice broke slightly. "And you repaid him by stealing his money and spending it on a party." Our father finally spoke up. "We'll pay for the surgery, and we'll pay Tommy back. But you have to understand, we thought we were doing the right thing." "The right thing," Jake repeated slowly. "Tell me, Dad, what's the right thing when your son needs surgery and you have the money to pay for it?" "To pay for it," our father admitted. "And what's the right thing when you've been stealing from your other son for years?" Our father couldn't meet Jake's eyes. "To stop stealing and pay him back." "Then why?" Jake asked, his voice rising despite his pain. "Did it take me nearly dying for you to figure out what the right thing was?" Nobody had an answer for that question. Jake turned back to me. "Tommy, I need to tell you something else. Something I should have said years ago." He paused, gathering his strength. "I've been jealous of you my whole life. Not because of money or success, but because you have integrity. You work for what you want. You take responsibility for your mistakes. You help people even when they don't deserve it. I've spent so many years wishing I could be like you instead of actually trying to become like you. Tears filled my eyes as Jake continued. I don't deserve your help. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I promise you, if I get through this surgery, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become the kind of man you've always been. I took the manila envelope from Jake's hands, knowing that whatever decision I made would define not just his future, but the future of our entire family. And that's when I realized I had one more card to play. I walked out of Jake's hospital room without saying a word, leaving my parents standing beside his bed with expressions of confused terror. Sarah followed me into the hallway, where I pulled out my phone and opened Jake's recording app. What are you thinking? She asked. I'm thinking it's time everyone knew the truth, I said, uploading Jake's recordings to my social media accounts. Our parents have been lying to our entire family for years. Time to see how they like being exposed. I typed a simple caption. My parents spent my surgery money on my brother's birthday party, then admitted they've been stealing from me for years while hiding $200,000 in investments. My brother nearly died tonight because they spent his insurance premium money on the party too. Listen to them admit everything. I tagged every family member I could think of. Uncle David, Aunt Susan, my cousins, our neighbors, family friends, and my co-workers from the auto shop. Then I posted it to the local community Facebook groups where my parents were active members. Tommy, are you sure about this? Sarah asked. Once this is out there, it should have been out there years ago, I said. They've been playing victim while stealing from their own children. Everyone deserves to know what kind of people they really are. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. The first call came from Uncle David, my father's younger brother. Tommy, I just listened to that recording. Please tell me this isn't real. Every word of it is real, Uncle David. I have bank statements, forged loan documents, and evidence of financial fraud going back 3 years. There was a long pause. I always wondered how Frank could afford that new boat last summer on his salary, and how Jake could live so well without working much. I should have asked more questions. They're good at hiding things, I said. Jake's in the hospital right now needing emergency surgery, and they're refusing to pay for it because they don't want to touch their investment accounts. What hospital? Uncle David asked immediately. I'm coming down there. Within an hour, the hospital waiting room was filling up with family members. Uncle David arrived first, followed by my cousin Maria and her husband Steve. Aunt Susan drove down from Portland with her teenage sons. Even Mrs. Henderson from next door showed up, carrying a casserole and wearing an expression of righteous anger. The community response was swift and merciless. My parents' phones were ringing constantly with calls from friends, neighbors, and extended family members who had heard the recordings. The local Facebook groups were exploding with comments from people sharing their own stories of my parents' manipulative behavior. Mrs. Patterson from across the street posted, I always wondered why Tommy looked so tired and thin, while Frank and Carol bragged about their investment returns. Now I know they were literally stealing from their own son. Jake's former high school friends were sharing stories about how my parents had always treated him like a golden child, while dismissing me as the responsible one who didn't need help. My coworker Danny posted, Tommy's been eating bologna sandwiches for lunch every day for 2 years, while working overtime to save for surgery. Meanwhile, his parents were stealing his money to throw parties. This is sick. But the most devastating response came from Father Mackenzie at St. Mary's Catholic Church, where my parents had been active members for 20 years. He posted a lengthy response on the church's Facebook page. I am deeply saddened to learn about the financial abuse that has occurred within one of our parish families. Stealing from one's own children violates fundamental Christian principles of love, honesty, and stewardship. Frank and Carol Thompson are no longer welcome to participate in church leadership until they have made full restitution and sought proper counseling. My parents' social circle collapsed in real time. The country club friends who had admired their financial success, the investment club they had joined to brag about their portfolio performance, the neighborhood association where my father served as treasurer, everyone was distancing themselves as quickly as possible. Uncle David found me in the hospital cafeteria around 9 in the evening. I just spoke with your parents, he said, sitting across from me. They're claiming this is all a misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding involves 3 years of forged signatures and systematic theft? I asked. That's exactly what I said, Uncle David replied. Tommy, I want to offer something. I'll pay for both surgeries. Yours and Jake's. Full amount, no questions asked. I stared at him. Uncle David, that's incredibly generous. But nothing, he interrupted. I've been watching Frank manipulate people my entire life. I should have intervened years ago when I started suspecting something was wrong. He pulled out his phone and showed me his banking app. I've got the money. More than enough. And frankly, I'd rather spend it helping my nephews than watching Frank continue to profit from his fraud. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. And there are conditions, Uncle David said. Frank and Carol pay me back every penny they stole from you, with interest. They publicly apologize to both you and Jake, and they get counseling for their financial abuse issues. Uncle David leaned forward. Tommy, I've been successful in business for 30 years. You know what I've learned? People who steal from family will steal from anyone. Your parents are going to face consequences way beyond losing some social standing. As if on cue, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my father's workplace. Tommy Thompson? Came the voice. Yes, this is Patricia Williams, Human Resources Director at First National Bank. Your father, Frank Thompson, has worked here for 15 years as a loan officer. My stomach sank. Is this about the recordings? Several community members have contacted us today about your family's situation. Given the nature of your father's position handling other people's financial matters, we need to conduct a full investigation into his conduct. She paused. I'm calling to inform you that your father has been suspended pending a complete audit of all loans he's processed in the past 5 years. I hung up and told Uncle David what had happened. It gets worse, he said. Your mother's volunteer position at the senior center has been revoked. Apparently, she had access to elderly residents' financial information for their assistance programs. They're concerned about potential elder abuse. The full scope of my parents' situation was becoming clear. Their financial crimes weren't just family matters anymore. They had destroyed their professional reputations, lost their social standing, and potentially faced criminal charges. Around 10:30 that evening, Jake texted me from his hospital bed. Surgery is scheduled for 6 a.m. tomorrow. Uncle David already talked to the financial office. Everything is paid for. I went back to his room and found him sitting up, looking more alert than he had in weeks. How do you feel about all this? I asked, gesturing toward the window where we could see cars in the parking lot filled with family members who had come to support us. Honestly, Jake said, I feel free for the first time in my life. I don't have to pretend to be perfect anymore. I don't have to live up to their expectations. I can just focus on getting better and figuring out who I actually am. He paused, and I feel like I have my brother back. I sat in the chair beside his bed. You never lost me, Jake. I was always here. I just didn't know how to help you without enabling them. You helped me anyway, Jake said. You drove me to appointments. You researched my condition. You figured out what was really wrong when they were too busy planning parties to notice I was suffering. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, listening to the sounds of the hospital around us. Tommy, Jake said finally, what happens after my surgery? To them, I mean. I looked out the window at the family members still gathered in the parking lot, people who had driven hours to support us once they learned the truth. I think they're going to learn what it feels like to face consequences for their actions, I said. And maybe, if they're willing to do the work, they might become better people. Do you think they can change? I considered the question. I don't know. But for the first time in our lives, they're going to have to try. 6 months later, I stood in the doorway of Jake's physical therapy clinic, watching my brother help an elderly woman work through her exercises. His movements were confident and pain-free, his smile genuine as he encouraged her progress. The transformation was remarkable, not just physically, but in every aspect of who he had become. She's doing great, Jake said, walking over after finishing the session. 3 weeks ago, she could barely walk 10 feet. Now she's planning to run a 5K with her granddaughter. Sounds familiar, I said, grinning. Except instead of 5Ks, you're planning to open your own clinic. Jake's face lit up. Did the loan approval come through? I handed him the envelope from First Community Bank. Congratulations, business partner. Jake had graduated from physical therapy school with the highest grades in his class, discovering a passion for helping others that had surprised everyone, including himself. The work was challenging and meaningful, nothing like the aimless partying that had defined his early 20s. I still can't believe you want to be business partners with me, Jake said. opening the approval letter. "After everything that happened, you've proven yourself over the past 6 months," I said. "Besides, someone needs to keep you from working 20-hour days." It was true. Jake had thrown himself into his studies and rehabilitation with an intensity that bordered on obsession, as if trying to make up for years of wasted time. I had to constantly remind him to take breaks and maintain balance in his life. My auto repair shop had grown into the most successful independent garage in town, largely due to word-of-mouth recommendations from community members who had supported us during the crisis. The honest work and fair pricing had earned customer loyalty that no amount of advertising could have purchased. Sarah and I had gotten married in a simple ceremony at Uncle David's house, surrounded by the family members who had rallied around us. The wedding was everything we wanted: intimate, meaningful, and completely free of drama. My parents had not been invited. "How are they doing?" Jake asked, as if reading my mind. Our parents had spent the past 6 months in intensive financial counseling and therapy, slowly working to understand the damage they had caused. The process had been humbling and painful for them, but necessary for any hope of eventual reconciliation. "Better, I think," I said. "They completed the restitution payments last month. Uncle David says they're actually attending the counseling sessions instead of just showing up." Frank had lost his job at the bank but found work as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit, earning less than half his previous salary. Carol had taken a part-time position at a grocery store, her first paid employment in 20 years. The lifestyle adjustment had been dramatic, but it had also given them perspective they had never possessed. "Are you ready for today?" Jake asked. Today was Thanksgiving, exactly 1 year after the confrontation that had changed everything. We were hosting dinner at my house for the first time, with Uncle David, Aunt Susan, and several cousins joining us. And for the first time in 6 months, our parents had been invited to attend. "I think so," I said. "Sarah's been cooking since yesterday. Uncle David is bringing his famous stuffing, and you're responsible for not collapsing dramatically during dinner." Jake laughed. "I'll try to contain myself." The conditions for our parents' invitation had been clear: a public apology to both of us, complete financial restitution, 6 months of counseling, and a written commitment to ongoing therapy. They had met every requirement, though the emotional work was far from finished. At 3 o'clock, cars began arriving at our small house. Uncle David and Aunt Susan came first, carrying dishes and warm hugs. My cousins followed with their children, filling the house with laughter and energy that had been missing from our family gatherings for years. At 3:30, my parents' car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as they sat for a moment, gathering courage. They looked older than their 58 and 56 years, the stress and consequences of their actions having taken a visible toll, but they also looked humbler, more genuine than I had ever seen them. Jake joined me at the window. "They look nervous," he observed. "Good," I said. "They should be nervous. They're trying to rebuild relationships they spent years destroying." Sarah appeared beside us, wearing the apron I had bought her for our first Thanksgiving as a married couple. "Should I let them in, or are you going to make them stand on the porch all evening?" I opened the door before my parents could knock. "Mom, Dad, Tommy," my mother said quietly, holding a small, wrapped package. "Thank you for inviting us." "Don't thank me yet," I said, stepping aside to let them enter. "You haven't made it through dinner." The afternoon was awkward, but not hostile. My parents sat quietly while Uncle David told stories about the family business. They listened as Jake described his physical therapy program and future clinic plans. They watched as Sarah and I moved around the kitchen together, clearly happy and well-matched as a couple. When we sat down to eat, Uncle David asked everyone to share something they were grateful for. The responses ranged from health and family to new opportunities and second chances. When it was my father's turn, he cleared his throat nervously. "I'm grateful for consequences," he said, surprising everyone. "I know that sounds strange, but this past year has taught me that consequences are a gift. They force you to see the truth about yourself and the damage you've caused." He looked directly at Jake and me. "I'm grateful that my sons were strong enough to stand up to me when I was wrong. I'm grateful that my family cared enough to hold me accountable. And I'm grateful for the chance to try to earn back your trust, even though I know I may never fully succeed." My mother wiped her eyes with her napkin. "I'm grateful for therapy," she said with a slight laugh. "I never thought I'd say that, but learning about financial abuse and emotional manipulation has been eye-opening. I'm grateful that I can finally see how much pain I caused and start trying to heal it. When it was my turn, I looked around the table at faces that had become genuinely supportive over the past year. I'm grateful for the truth, I said. Even when it was painful to hear and difficult to speak, truth gives you the foundation to build real relationships instead of ones based on manipulation and lies. Jake spoke last. I'm grateful for rock bottom, he said, earning surprised looks from around the table. Because that's where I learned the difference between falling down and being knocked down. When you fall down because of your own choices, you can get back up and make different choices. When you're knocked down by other people's selfishness, you can get back up and refuse to be knocked down again. He raised his water glass. To getting back up. After dinner, my parents asked to speak with Jake and me privately. We went out to the back porch, where the November evening was crisp and clear. We wanted to give you these, my mother said, handing us each an envelope. It's not money, it's something else. I opened mine to find a handwritten letter, several pages long. We wrote down every specific thing we did wrong, my father explained. Every lie, every manipulation, every dollar we stole. Our counselor said accountability requires specificity, not just general apologies. I scanned the first page, seeing detailed admissions of financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and systematic favoritism that had damaged both of us in different ways. We also wrote down our commitment to continue therapy and the specific changes we're making in our behavior, my mother added. Not because we expect forgiveness, but because you deserve to know we're serious about becoming better people. Jake was reading his letter with tears in his eyes. This must have been hard to write, he said. The hardest thing we've ever done, my father admitted. But not as hard as watching our sons succeed without us, because we were too selfish to be the parents you deserved. We stood in silence for a few minutes, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. I want you to know, my mother said finally, that we're proud of the men you've become despite our failures, not because of anything we did right. Tommy, your integrity and work ethic came from inside you, not from our character building, my father added. Jake, your compassion and determination to help others came from your own heart, not from our enabling. You both became good men in spite of us, not because of us, my mother continued. And we're grateful that you turned out better than we taught you to be. As we walked back inside, Jake pulled me aside. Do you think they'll actually change? He asked. I watched through the window as our parents helped Sarah clear dishes, moving carefully and respectfully in her kitchen, asking permission before touching anything. I think they're trying, I said. Real change takes years, not months. But they've done everything we asked them to do, and they're continuing to do the work even when it's uncomfortable. Is that enough? I considered the question. It's enough to start rebuilding trust. Slowly, with boundaries, and with the understanding that earning forgiveness is a process, not an event. Jake nodded. I can live with that. As the evening wound down and family members began heading home, Uncle David pulled me aside. You boys handled this whole situation with more wisdom than most adults twice your age, he said. You stood up for yourselves without becoming cruel. You held people accountable without seeking revenge. And you found a way to keep the door open for healing without making yourselves vulnerable to further abuse. We had good examples, I said, looking around at the extended family that had supported us. And good counselors who taught us the difference between forgiveness and enabling. Uncle David smiled. Your grandmother would be proud of the men you've become. She always said the best revenge against people who hurt you is to become so successful and happy that their opinion stops mattering. As I cleaned up the kitchen that evening, Sarah came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist. Good first Thanksgiving as hosts? She asked. Perfect first Thanksgiving as hosts, I replied, turning to face her. Even the hard parts. Do you think things will keep getting better? I looked around our small house, filled with the warmth of genuine family relationships and honest communication. I think we've learned that better isn't something that happens to you. It's something you create by making good choices every day and refusing to let other people's dysfunction define your life. The truth was, I had learned that real family wasn't about blood relations or obligations. Real family was about people who showed up for each other honestly, who held each other accountable with love, and who supported each other's growth even when it was difficult. Jake had learned to take responsibility for his choices while still expecting respect and honesty from others. Our parents were learning that love required sacrifice of their own comfort, not sacrifice of their children's well-being. And our extended family had learned that staying silent about abuse enables it to continue. Most importantly, we had all learned that consequences aren't punishment, they're teachers, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them face the full consequences of their actions so they have the opportunity to learn and grow. The young man who had sat at that Thanksgiving table a year ago, confused and hurt by his family's betrayal, had grown into someone who understood the difference between fixing people and supporting them, between enabling and loving, between forgiveness and foolishness. As I turned off the kitchen lights and headed upstairs with Sarah, I felt genuinely grateful for the first time in years. Not just for what I had, but for what I had learned. Not just for the people who had supported me, but for the strength I had discovered within myself. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't getting what you want. Sometimes it's getting exactly what you need to become the person you were always meant to be. Now I want to ask you something important. Have you ever had to choose between enabling someone you love and holding them accountable for their actions? How did you handle that difficult balance between family loyalty and personal boundaries? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your experience might help someone else facing a similar situation. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to support more content like this. Subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding your own path to happiness. And please share this story with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the power of truth, accountability, and genuine healing. Thank you for taking this journey with me. And remember, you deserve relationships built on respect, honesty, and mutual support. Don't settle for anything less.